Original video animation, never aired on TV but released via DVD, VHS, and of course, Laserdisc. We're talking old stuff, obscure stuff, whatever else I feel like. It's an OVA Odyssey, baby. I have no idea where this ship is headed. I just find 10 titles and make a video because you people keep asking me to, so let me give you what you came here for. Let's start things off with the OVA that started it all. Dallos from 1983. The first OVA ever released, which means I probably should have covered this all the way back in episode 1 of OVA Odyssey, but you know, these things happen. Now because Dallos is the first OVA, there are a few noticeable issues that famously plague the format. Pacing is a bit off, the characters aren't well defined, and the animation can be inconsistent at times. The action scenes look good, but everything else is pretty stiff. As for the story, Dallos is about a young man named Shin who lives in a grand city on the moon. A group of malcontents flirt with revolution, and Shin finds himself joining up after unintentionally getting dragged in.
嘘だろ。僕は何もしていないぞ。手錠を外してくれ。
These terrorists, or freedom fighters as the case may be, don't like being second-class citizens. You see, the Earth ran out of resources a while back, and so a mining colony was set up on the moon to revitalize the big blue marble. The plan worked, but it resulted in the creation of a slave class on the moon who have to wear rings around their heads and acquiesce to whatever the Earth beings demand. The fight between the Space Noids and the Earth Tards plays out over the 4 episodes of this OVA. It's nothing special, there's no highbrow political intrigue or memorable warriors on either side, but it's fine for what it is.
出て行ってください。お薬も食料もいりません。だから私たちのうちに争いを持ち込まないで。お願いだから出て行って。
It's also directed by Mamoru Oshii, a man I feel like I mentioned a lot on this channel. I believe Dallos is his directorial debut, and it's certainly not a bad one. But if you're expecting something a bit more like Angel's Egg, then you'll be pretty disappointed. Based on the cover of the anime and my experience with the director's other works, I was really expecting something a bit more, I don't know, psychological? Or pretentious might be the better word for it. I mean that as a compliment. I, for one, like the philosophical monologues that accompany the lengthy shots of dilapidated buildings and ruins covered in vines and water and whatnot. Dallos doesn't really have any of that. It's more of an action show with an interesting premise, but not enough time or maybe not enough focus to do something interesting with it. That being said, this OVA is a piece of history, a forefather of some of my favorites, therefore it deserves to be remembered. A warlock destroys the hometown of Lemnear and takes her brother away as a trophy, so she swears her vengeance and sets off to kill this sick son of a gun. Bit of a Legend of Zelda situation going on here with Lemnear. I really thought that was the name of the dude, but I'm not complaining. There's really not that much to this one. It's a single 40-minute fantasy adventure from the tail end of the 80s, and you can really tell by the designs. Big hair and beautiful faces, not to mention the armor. It's straight out of a classic sword and sorcery film. Now, if you've watched my Grimgar video, then you heard me say some very not nice things about fan service and sexy female armor, and I will not change my take. It can absolutely ruin a tone. It's like the Marvel comedy problem, but the comedy here is boobs. I'm not a fan of this, and I will die on this hill. So you're probably expecting me to complain about Lemnear's battle bikini, but I won't. And maybe it would bother me if Lemnear was trying to be realistic and grounded, but it's not. It's just a typical sword and sorcery pulp comic like Conan the Barbarian, but Japanese and gender bent. It's also made by this guy, a man whose nickname is the Master of Breast. He's the guy behind Plastic Little, by the way, an OVA I've covered previously and one I do very much enjoy. If you're wondering, compared to Plastic Little, Legend of Lemnear is not nearly as, bouncy. But it is a bit more gory. My biggest complaint with Lemnear is that it feels too slow at the start. The second half is just way more interesting and action-packed, and I think that if it had that pace from the start, then it would probably be more Lemnear. It's not bad, but it is more boring than it has any right to be. The last thing I'll mention is that there's no Blu-ray remaster that I'm aware of, so if you're scared of 480, then do a 180 and get on out of here. Otherwise, give it a watch. Cute girls and cool jets. That is a sufficient description for Blue Sky Girl Squadron, but I guess I could go on. The 801st Tactical Training Squadron is an all-female aerial acrobatic team made up of insubordinates, ingrates, and the incompetent. And Isurugi, who just got transferred and might just find the love of his life despite being a loser infatuated with 2D girls. If only. Alright, I'm about 80% sure this anime was made to convince an entire generation of NEETs that they'll find their one and only by enlisting in the armed forces. These things do happen, it's usually a sign of desperation. A flickering of the last embers that once lit the fires of the great empires of old. It's not gonna work on me though. I am not dying in the desert for Israel. I will die in the snow, alone and cold, bleeding out and reflecting on what led me on this long march called life. And if I might consider such an end just recompense for sins unforgivable. We got really off topic. Blue Sky Girl Squadron is a perfectly fine episodic rom-com with serviceable animation and some decent, if not generic, characters. It's not Top Gun with girls, I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of Top Gun to be honest, but it's a pretty good slice of life show that does have its moments. One of those moments would be all of episode 5 when the Americans show up.
Oh, 日本のコントロールタワー in English very聞き取りにくいです。ごめんなさい, I'm sorry です。
Also, I am a Mitaka fan. She is very cute, reminds me a lot of Raleigh Vincent from Gunsmith Cats. They both got the short dark hair, the connection to military hardware, and a similar personality. Oh yeah, also they're brown. One thing to note about this OVA is that it doesn't have a real ending. There's no cliffhanger in the final episode or anything, but don't expect a meaningful conclusion for Isurugi, Mitaka, or the other chick whose name I forgot. That being said, the last episode does focus on 2 of the side characters and is more dramatic and emotional than the other episodes, so it's not a bad way to end things. There was definitely more that could have been done with this OVA, but if you like some slice of life shenanigans, some military mumbo jumbo, and a tried and true love triangle, then you should be fine with what we got.
イスルギ君、今度こそ2人で行こうね。
何言ってんだい、私とだろ。
なんでよ。
文句あんのか。
まあまあ2人とも。
Puppet Princess, a one and done that's pretty fun and a little gruesome at times, and very gruesome at other times. We get a young girl who is the sole survivor of her clan and wants revenge on the guy who gave her that title. Her father had created a collection of highly sought-after special puppets that are pretty useful in a fight. But even with these puppets, the young girl's quest for revenge is a hopeless endeavor. That is why she seeks out a legendary ninja, but only finds a ronin with big eyebrows and a common enemy. Puppet Princess is a hidden gem. Definitely no diamond, but still something pretty flashy. The animation is expressive, the fights are creative, and the characters are charming. Despite the abundance of blood and other such nasty things, Puppet Princess never falls into the edgy pit. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just nice to see an OVA that can balance the serious with the silly. However, I am not trying to downplay some of the more brutal aspects of this anime. Some scenes are certainly on the horrific side, and other scenes might rub some people the wrong way. We'll chalk that up to cultural differences. I'll take a firm stand and say that the 2 main leads with their fun dynamic hard carry the show. A pure-hearted, optimistic young girl, a jaded, cynical older guy, the banter basically writes itself. And lastly, Puppet Princess doesn't meander at any point. Things progress at a nice quick pace, which makes the 40-minute runtime feel like half that. And the final all-out assault leads to a satisfying conclusion to the story, as well as being a satisfying spectacle for the eyes. It's a shame they only made the one, but it's based off a one-shot, so that's all they really planned on making. Took them a while to get this thing out though. That one-shot came out in 1988, the OVA 2000. Better late than never, I guess. Alright, so you know how I said Puppet Princess has a lot of blood but isn't edgy? Well, this one has a lot of blood and is also not edgy. It's just pure gore slop.
I guess what's on the inside isn't too pretty either, is it?
I don't really know how much of this I can show, not just because of the insides, but also because of the outsides, so let's just keep this brief. Basically, the world has been ravaged by natural disasters and is now overrun with demons too. Only a fraction of humanity has survived, but maybe the situation will change now that Kakugo, a chud with a black belt and super suit, is here to make the world a better place, one dead demon at a time. Alright, let's run down the list. The story, stupid. The characters, bland. The animation, Not half bad actually. Nothing amazing, but there's some clear effort on display. But really, there's only one reason to watch this OVA, and that reason should be pretty apparent by now. Apocalypse Zero is almost as infamous as MD Geist. It's filled with a bunch of stuff I'm not gonna list off because I like money too much, but the bottom line is that you're in for some over-the-top, absurdly offensive freaky antics and questionable artistic choices. Or maybe I'm just not giving the thing the credit it deserves. Maybe Apocalypse Zero is actually a well-thought-out misanthropic commentary on the perverse and destructive nature of mankind. A subtle critique of those who would label anyone who dares to oppose traditional societal values that only came into being after years of unpunished conquest and oppression as evil and monstrous. Perhaps humanity is the real monster after all, and these so-called freaks are just misunderstood outcasts who lash out against the world only because they have never known love and kindness.
Let's go, Weenie! We'll fight this guy together and get rid of him!
What you just saw was a demon fighting a man with his penis. Also, the main bad guy is the brother of the main character who turned his back on humanity, signed a contract with a devil, and transitioned into a woman. What do they mean by this? Look, Apocalypse Zero is just fun in a messed up way. Should you watch it? Morally, no. But who am I to judge?
My body is a sword for innocent people.
We're the demons who crawl up from hell to devour human flesh. Noble blood runs in our veins.
I never knew there were homosexual demons.
Setsuna Mudo was a 16-year-old young man who could never quite fit in with everyone else. The bullies at school won't leave him alone, and even his parents kicked him out because they think he's some kind of a freak when all he wants to do is bang his sister.
Mother.
There's also like a war going on between angels and demons, and he's the reincarnation of something called an organic angel named Alexiel, who rebelled against God so she could be with her brother, who is an inorganic angel named Raziel. Yeah, it's one of those anime. I do the whole fake out high IQ take, but I just did it for the other one, so do me a favor and pretend I just said something witty.
Whoa, that moon is huge.
Angel Sanctuary is a theologically retarded dumpster fire filled with melodramatic and angsty characters, a sacrilegious and sanctimonious message, and a bewildering and disordered premise. It's also very funny dubbed.
I've had an earnest desire to make love to my real sister. Oh!
This 3-episode OVA is just a brief glimpse of the 20-volume manga it tried to adapt in part, and it seems like even the fans of the manga don't like this thing. But I'll tell you what, I do, because it's a pretty entertaining fever dream that always had me curious about what kind of nonsense would pop up next. Spoiler alert, it was usually incest.
God, please forsake us.
As for how this anime handles religion, I'll refrain from the said contra. They got the names and the places straight out of the Bible, but that's really about it. It's not a serious depiction of any faith I'm aware of. You know what happened to hell in this show? It got destroyed because of pollution from our world. I don't even know how that works. Angel Sanctuary isn't the best, worst anime out there, but it's still pretty bad, which is good, I guess.
You look awful.
Thank you.
Watch it with some buddies, or at least some drinks.
What's that? You wanna see my room? Sure, let's go.
What the?
オタクを超えたオタクの中のオタクオタキングになってやるんだオタキング
Otaku No Video is the quintessential otaku OVA. It's a story about a man falling in love with this thing called anime, making some new nerdy friends, and starting their own company with the hopes of spreading the joy of otaku culture all around the world. And it's all loosely based on the origin story for Studio Gainax. And if you couldn't tell by the classic Gainax bounce, this was made by Gainax for anime fans from the 80s. There's a lot of references to anime, both popular and niche, as well as some real-life interviews with otakus, both domestic and foreign.
いいえ、不幸です。なぜ私はこの黄金の国で生まれることができなかったのでしょうか
These interviews aren't real, even if they are real to me, because this is more of a mockumentary than an actual documentary. But some of these guys are based on real people that the good people at Gainax interacted with at one point or another. You think maybe the guy who had some custom glasses to unpixelate his porn was a good friend of Hideaki Anno? Or maybe he was Anno himself? Nah, just kidding. Ano was the guy playing the erotic computer game. The stuff surrounding Otaku no Video and the context in which it released is arguably more interesting than the actual OVA, but it still gives you some good insight on how the old school losers operated, from making garage kits to stealing animation cells. It also captures the rapid decay in hygiene and general well-being common to many in otaku. Oddly enough, the OVA is a tad on the cynical side. You watch the main character go from an average guy with a girlfriend and a spot on his college tennis team to a social outcast who lets himself go and loses his sweetheart after cheating on her with anime. Watching this 30 years later after it released is very interesting. The culture surrounding anime has completely changed. You don't need to have your face blurred out or use a fake name when talking about the stuff. It's now socially acceptable to say you like these Chinese cartoons. Now, obviously, there are still plenty of people out there who will give you strange looks, but back in the day, people really used to get publicly shunned or shoved into lockers for liking this stuff. Maybe we should go back to that. I feel like we've gone a little too far in the other direction.
This is an anime. It is Shingeki no Kyojin.
Like Dallos, this is one I mostly recommend just because of its place in history. There are some pretty cool things that happen. You get to see a little peek behind the curtain in the anime production scene as well as the model kit business, and there's more than enough instances of quality animation on display, but you'll only get something out of this one if you've already sunk a lot of your time on the old stuff, or if you just really like Gainax.
目指すは宇宙オタクの星を探すんだ
お口を開けてくださいはい
Alice is a shy girl whose only friends are green and leafy, and she feels like they talk to her. It's a little strange, but what's stranger is when she dreams about being another person in a lab on the moon. And she's not the only person who had this dream either. A couple of her classmates, as well as the kids she babysits, have had similar dreams. But it turns out these dreams aren't just dreams, they are memories from a past life. A life that is marked by misfortune, which seems to be continuing into their new lives. Also, they were aliens with psychic powers, and one of the former scientists, who is now a little boy, is a little upset with the world for reasons I won't spoil. Please Save My Earth was a decently popular manga from 1987 to 1994, which got a 6-episode OVA in 1993, which unfortunately doesn't cover all of the manga. That might put you off, but it's not like the OVA ends abruptly, so please don't pass on Please Save My Earth just because it never got to the end. The stuff it does cover is pretty interesting, and Production IG did some fine work with the animation. I like the look of the show quite a bit, even if some of the designs are pretty standard shoujo stuff. Oh yeah, this is a shoujo, which means, well. This was the manga that inspired the reincarnated romance from Sailor Moon, but more importantly, it inspired a certain concept for a certain Sonic character from a certain Adventure 2 battle game on the Dreamcast. I do have some minor gripes about the world building in this OVA, but I'm willing to bet some of my issues are probably addressed in the manga, which I haven't read. I do appreciate the darker tone and slower pace, as well as most of the characters. Some of these VAs do a really good job selling the drama. I did think that the one guy, Haruhiko, has a voice that just didn't fit, but yeah, I don't know, that could just be me.
これ変だよ。おかしいよ。こんなの設計できるだけの技術、今の地球人じゃ可能なはず。
I guess I just expected him to have a heavier voice, but now that I think about it, there is kind of a good reason for why he sounds this way, so maybe I should retract that complaint. I won't though, because my other complaint is that I didn't like when the story decided to focus more on him instead of Alice and that little rascal Rin. Fellas, take notes, we are getting outplayed by an 8-year-old.
もう少しかがんでください。大丈夫。ガム捨てますから。
It really sucks that this anime didn't get more episodes, but it wasn't for lack of quality. Definitely one of the better OVA I've seen, but I probably won't be reading the manga. And I'm still not over Kino.
誰だ
どうして服従することしか考えないの
Over here in the greatest democracy the world has ever known, except that one time, or this time, we don't pick favorites here, movies and TV shows based on video games usually suck. Unless they're anime, in which case, well, how anime are we talking? What we have here is an anime adaptation of a fighting game franchise that hasn't had a new game since this thing came out, unless you count remasters and collaborations. It's the game that sexy vampire chick from Marvel vs. Capcom is from, Darkstalkers, or as it's known in Japan, Vampire.
この大地は光によって作られたはずだ。いつ闇は生み出されてしまったのか。
This is the 4-episode OVA made by Madhouse, not to be confused with the 13-episode TV series made by Americans.
Children of the cat goddess, get them!
Now, I've never played the games, I'm a lover, not a fighter, so I have no idea how well it adapts the story or if the characters are true to their video game counterparts. But just going off of the OVA, Darkstalkers is pretty alright. The characters are great, cool designs, interesting gimmicks, and the world of Darkstalkers is just so wild. Maybe a little all over the place though. I have no idea what time period this is supposed to be. I initially thought it was like the Victorian era because of how most of the people dressed and the reliance on wagons, but then some dude shows up with an electric guitar performing a rock concert for the Inquisition, and there's airships, but also medieval Spanish knights and feudal Chinese cities and ancient advanced robots and those old Aztec pyramids. It's crazy, and I kinda like it. Makes the world feel so fun, and this anime is nothing if not fun, although it can get a little sad too. The guy who is effectively the main character hunts these powerful beings that have taken over the world called Darkstalkers, even though he himself is part Darkstalker, which is the source of his tremendous power, but also the source of his greatest pain. I know exactly how he feels. I'm a quarter Puerto Rican. I sort of skipped over the plot, but I mean, do you care? It's a fighting show. You're really just here for the fights, right? And they are decent fights, but I will say there are a few in the middle section that aren't much to look at. But that's okay, because in the last episode, the animators go all out. I was very surprised by this OVA. I guess I was expecting something that felt more like a cheap tie-in or a shameless cash grab, but it's actually a very enjoyable 2.5 hours. Almost makes me want to play the games. Almost.
私を対戦相手に指名してきた敵がいるのだ。その行為が愚かなこと。死をもってそやつの体に教えねばなるまい。
I have saved the most criminally underrated for last. Do you like superhero shows, specifically stuff like Kamen Rider? Well, then you'll love this, I think. I've never actually seen Kamen Rider, aside from a few memes I probably shouldn't post. Shin Hurricane Polymar. It's a remake of Hurricane Polymar, a TV anime from the 70s. It's about a wannabe detective and his overqualified assistant who fight bad guys to pay for their $4,000 a month premium New York City studio suite. Oh, sorry, I meant Washinkyo. Alright, what's so great about this OVA? Literally anything that happens once the Polymar theme starts playing. This is some of the best action I've seen. Very fluid and highly detailed. The impact, the spurts of blood, the song, it's all just so awesome. I feel like a kid watching Batman, the animated series, all over again, except this time they don't have to deal with censorship guidelines, so all the fights get real rough. And I haven't even mentioned the best part. The Shin in Shin Hurricane doesn't just stand for new, it also stands for Shimbo. Akiyuki Shimbo, the Shaft guy. He directed this, which is why it's filled with bright contrasting colors and beautiful still frames. Made all the better by the Blu-ray that just got released a couple of years ago. I have no idea how this compares to the old TV show, visually or thematically, and I'm not gonna find out. There are already several old TV anime I have on my watch list, and I'm not about to watch 26 episodes just to judge these two 2 new ones. I will say the biggest thing going against this OVA is that it's very bare bones. You get a little introduction to the main characters, but it's surface level and very rushed. Same with the general story. I don't think they ever actually intended to make this a full-on series. It feels more like a reimagining meant to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the old show, but it is something to keep in mind. Me personally, I don't mind. It is a fun, quick trip that, yeah, could be described as a hot mess, but I mean, come on. Who doesn't love one of those? Alright, that about wraps things up. If you want more OVA, then be patient and trust the plan, or watch some of the old episodes. And until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Vult, and a big thank you to all the cultured.